And according to structured psychology, that environment forms an essential part of who we are. So if we're looking for our identity, if we're looking for answers to questions like, who am I? That's a very good place to start looking.
Good morning, Rogers.
Good morning.
So I think the question that comes to so many of us as we begin to explore our psychological selves is, who am I? This question of finding oneself. It comes up repeatedly, and especially with those who are trying to understand themselves and others better. So I'm curious what you have to say about what it means to know oneself.
Yeah, this is a very common question. It's something that makes a lot of people very nervous and confused. First of all, because they actually don't understand what it is they're looking for. But in essence, what they're trying to locate is something that identifies them in comparison to or in relationship to everything else that is around them. That is to say, their environment. And in understanding this, the very best thing you can do is examine that environment itself. According to structured psychology, the environment is a very basic entity that forms an essential part of who each one of us is. And each one of us, believe it or not, has a different environment with which to relate. Even if we're twins, and even if you and I are standing together and in exactly the same place almost, we are still seeing from a different perspective, in different ways and different manners, that environment. And according to structured psychology, that environment forms an essential part of who we are. So if we're looking for our identity, if we're looking for answers to questions like, who am I? That's a very good place to start looking. And that's simply, as I've just said, because we form a part of that exterior world, and that exterior world, or our environment, forms a very essential part of us. So my suggestion for anyone who is trying to form some kind of sensible idea of who they are is to examine their environment. Where are they? Who are they in the sense of those around them? Because those around them, those things and people, form a part of who they are. So in order to do this, we have to back up a little bit. So let's do that very quickly and understand that in order for us to remain alive and well and psychologically stable, we have to realize that we're relational beings. And that means that we are who we are genetically, who each one of us is, in a genetic sense, in relationship to the outside world. If there is no relationship to that outside world, we can't remain alive. We can't be. And certainly we can't form a psychological self. So, understanding that it is that world around us that we relate to that can form, and that definitely forms a part of who we are, we can understand how important it is. And understanding how important it is answers questions like, why do I care so much about other people and other things? Why do I spend my time asking, I wonder if I was dressed correctly? Did I respond to that question the right way? How did I look when I went to solicit a job placement? Did I say the right thing? Did I say the wrong thing? All of those kinds of questions are in relationship to the world around us. That is to say, our environment. So when we're looking for who we are, that's the place, as I said before initially, a very good place to begin looking. So let's do that. Let's do that for a minute. Let's look at our immediate environment. Let's look at our parents. Let's look at our siblings. Let's look at our best friends. Let's look at our school. Where do we go to school? What was school like? Where am I now? Who are the people I deal with now? What do they look like? How do they feel to me? How do I evaluate them? And little by little, making up just a small, concise list of those feelings you have about this world around you and how you interact with it, you're beginning to form a very good idea of who you are. Then, little by little, you can also ask your questions. The questions like, how do I feel about this, or how do I feel about that? What are my tendencies? What am I driven to do? What pleases me? What scares me, frightens me? What things I like, what things I don't like? And there, you're making a list, really, of the genetic drive that you have and how it manifests itself for you. And the combination of these two things, the things that you like, that you're driven to do, that makes you feel happy, that makes you frightened, that saddens you, if you have a list of those things, plus a list of the things that you just wrote down about the environment and how you feel about that, that is really who you are. And no one is going to have the same list. It is amazing how you can have someone make these lists and compare them. And as hard as you try, you will never find two lists that are exactly the same. And why is that? That's because there cannot be two lists that are exactly the same. Nobody has the same genetic background as you do, or Sam does, or Sally. No one has the same environment with which they work. Again, even though you may have a twin, and that twin is standing right next to you, and you would say, well, how do you see this world out there? You'd be surprised to find that your twin is going to have a different view of that world around them than you do. So when you're done, and you have your two lists, your environmental list and your genetic list, look at that list, evaluate that list, understand that list. And once you have, you've nailed yourself. You've found out who you are. And that's the best way to do it. In my view, if you have a question about what you're doing in this world and where you are, start there. That's a perfect place to begin.
I wonder, I think for so many of us, we struggle to also please our environment. For example, get along with our peers, to make sure that we are being approved by our parents in our actions. So when we're making our list, should those things be a factor in our list, or should we try to strip away trying to please anyone else and make sure we're focusing on exactly what it is that we ourselves want?
No. As a matter of fact, those things are primary to understanding who we are, each one of us is. That is to say, and initially, of course, it's always the parents and the siblings. How do you get along with your parents? You can ask yourself that question and evaluate it, because that's going to form a very essential, basic part of your list, both environmentally and genetically. That is essential to understanding yourself. So it's not a question of eliminating those factors from the list that you're making to identify who you are, but rather concentrate on those very things, the things that are closest to you, your mother, your father, a sibling, someone you're living with, an aunt, an uncle, the person that you have most access to, that you deal with most of the time. is an essential person for you, an essential part of your environment. And that, therefore, is an essential part of who you are. So, yeah, I would strongly suggest that you definitely include parents and siblings and the environment that you lived in when you were younger, where you live now, how you exist in the world that surrounds you at the present time. All of those things are a factor.
And what answer are we looking for? What does this bring to our lives if we are able to determine who we are?
Well, that is just answering the question. That is to say, people who feel confused or out of space or lost need to start there, just to get an idea of who they are in comparison with everyone and everyone else and all the other things that are not people, that are not animate, mean to them. And there is no way to say, I am so-and-so, in the sense of creating a list of concrete characteristics. You're just going to get some very distant characteristics. You're not going to get anything that's concrete. But anyone's identity isn't concrete either. It's in constant flux. It's changing all the time. And the reason why it's changing all the time is because your environment is changing all the time. Your essential genetics may not change at all, but in relationship to the world around you, which is essential for you to keep alive, to remain the person you are, that will change constantly. There is no end to the change that you will go through there.
So what do we do if we find out we don't like who we are or we're unhappy with our current lot in life? Can we make changes to who we are?
Well, essentially speaking, we cannot change who we are in the sense of the genetic people that each one of us is. That is to say, that is an unchangeable factor. That is an unchangeable aspect of our identity, each one of our own selves. What you can change are your beliefs, your ideas, certainly your behavior. You can change where you live, who you relate to. You can change all kinds of things. But you just can't change the genetic person that you are. That will react, however, essentially in different ways the minute you start to change your environment. When you move out of the place where you are, so to speak, either do that in a physical way or do that in a psychological way, in a virtual way, changing your group of friends, changing the places you spend the most time. You don't have to pick up and cross country or leave the country entirely behind. You can do that. You can be the protagonist of the changes that you make. And once those changes have been made, you will change as well. I'd add to that the fact that the more dramatic a change you make, the more dramatic will be the changes in you and the person you are. So if you pick up and go from New York to Los Angeles, you don't have to go that far. It doesn't have to be a physical distance that you latch onto. You can go 3 blocks away, or you can just, as I said before, change the friends that you have, the people that you deal with, that you relate to. That constitutes environmental change as well. But once those changes have been made, you'll see a very different person in comparison to the person you were before when you've made that change.
So that kind of helps explain that if I go back and visit with my family, that some of the behaviors that I thought had gone away suddenly reappear again, and we seem to regress feels like we regress to our younger selves. Is that what's really happening?
That's what's really happening. Exactly. So if we go home all of a sudden, oh my God, nothing's changed here. It's the same old, same old. This is this I know I don't like this. This isn't for me. Go back where you feel good. Go back where you feel right. And when you change your environment, you're changing yourself. You are dealing with an entirely different world out there, and that's going to affect you. So yes, you're absolutely correct. You go back to the old environment, you will go back to your old self.
So, is there a correlation between feeling happy and content with oneself and being in the right environment?
Definitely, there definitely is. It is. It is the product. Your happiness, your satisfaction, the way you feel about yourself and others, has an enormous amount to do with where you are, who you deal with, and where you're situated psychologically. It's it's essential to creating the kind of person that you want to be. And that very often includes and can be locked into the idea of happiness and satisfaction. But has a lot to do with where you are and how you deal with that world that surrounds you.
So often we receive the advice that we should try to present ourselves as our authentic self in order to find happiness in any situation. But I find this an elusive possibility because here again, I don't know what it means to be my authentic self, especially if I don't even know who I am. So what do you have to say about presenting ourselves with authenticity in the world?
Well, again, you have to go back to who you are genetically. If you return to your list that you made out of the things you like, the things that repulse you, the things that draw you to them, what makes you laugh? What makes you cry? What is it that irritates or annoys you? What pleases you? What relaxes your day? When you've made that list, that tells you pretty much who you authentically are, so to speak. Those feelings, those emotions will not change. Those will always be the same. You might add to them as you discover new things, but the basic fundamental list that you made when you first made that list out will always remain with you. And if you wish, you can call that your authentic self, because that's never going to change. Now, as I said before, you could change your behavior because you're forced to, for example, or you find it convenient to do so in a certain ambience that you might find yourself. But that's not your authentic self. That's just a circumstantial you. And some people never find the environment that allows them to be their authentic selves. It's very rare that you can, but you can get very, very close. You can, if you change from your home environment to a completely different environment that brings you out to play, so to speak, that lets you be who you are and feel good about that, you're getting closer and closer to that authentic being that you're looking for, and one that is stable and always the same way.
So would you say then that if somebody is happy with themselves, very confident, and feels no need to go in search of themselves, they might already be in an environment that is appropriate for who they truly are?
Yep, exactly.
It's just that easy.
It is just that easy and just that hard. Why do I say it's as hard as it is easy? Because for those that are not initially and naturally, let's just say naturally, content, satisfied, and happy with themselves and with the lives they're leading, to find a place and an environment that does please them is not a walk in the park. It can be a real task. It may or may not be the next place they go to or try. It may take 3 or 4 or 5 different attempts to situate the place where they feel at home. They feel good about themselves. They feel that those that are around them understand them. That's not easy to find. You can be lucky and be born in one, just like you mentioned, and there's no problem. Just stay home. You move 3 doors down the street, make your life there. It's a good place. Those are good people for you. But if they're not, it may take you some time before you find the place for you.
Are there people that would be better off just getting away from all other people and finding happiness in true isolation?
Well, this is the old hermit story. And you should remember that most hermits arrive at a certain age. You don't find a 7-year-old hermit in a tree. You might find a 70-year-old hermit in a tree, but not a 7-year-old. And what the hermit has discovered is that he or she just isn't happy anywhere. So they decide to completely eliminate as much as they can their authentic, their concrete or real environment. And they live virtually. They make up their own environment. And the environment that they create is the environment that they're happy in. Only that environment can't be real. It can't force itself on them because they don't participate. So they live in a cabin on the side of a mountain. They live in a tree. They live somewhere where they're not confronted by real, honest, concrete feedback from the relationships that they have, but virtual ones. These are people that live virtually, and they can find a certain degree of happiness living that way.
It's interesting that you use the word virtual, because I think many of us, when we hear the word virtual, will immediately go to the internet, where we're in chat rooms and speaking with others in a virtual environment. But that's not really what you're talking about here, is it?
Well, yes and no. There is a certain virtual aspect to what we do on the internet. As a matter of fact, I still would remain fairly confident to call that virtual, in comparison to, let's say that, to an actual concrete relationship. And why do I say that? It's because you get to turn that off if you like. Whereas if I'm speaking or in relationship to someone who is physically in front of me, I don't have that option. It's much more difficult. I'm receiving from that person very concrete feedback, relational feedback. Whereas when I feel that there is a distance, a certain control that I have over the presence of the person or the thing or the situation that I'm in relationship with, that is a virtual relationship. So it's much easier for me to pick up the phone and talk to someone than it is to talk to that someone directly. And speaking of the telephone or the internet, it's easier still if I text that person. So we find that people are constantly texting their friends instead of phoning them. And the reason for that is it's a safer place to be relationally. So I would say that, yes, that It's a virtual experience. The experience you and I are having right now is more virtual than if you were sitting directly in front of me and I was sitting directly in front of you. If you can understand that.
I do. And I think you're explaining why the phenomenon of trolling on the internet is so easy for some people to engage with because they've removed themselves from the situation, or they don't feel that it's as real, so they can say horrible things that they probably wouldn't say right to someone's face. Do I have that correct?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Near my house here, we have um, groups of people that work on gardens and build walls and do all kinds of things. And at lunchtime, we used to see them in groups and they're chatting and they're laughing and they're carrying out something fierce. We don't see that anymore. We see them in the same group and nobody's talking to nobody. They're all on their telephones, texting or looking or observing, but nobody is talking to each other. It's just a safer psychological place to be for them, to be in a virtual ambience and not in a concrete or real one.
Safer, yes, perhaps, but also not as enriching and rewarding as.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah, so let's talk about the downside of the safety of virtual relationships. I suspect you're going to have an opinion on that.
Very definitely, yes. The concrete relationship is the relationship that gives you the concrete feedback that you're really looking for. The problem is there is a threat that goes along with that relationship. And the threat is that you can find that the relationship isn't a confirmation, but rather a contradiction of what you're looking for. And that contradiction will be a concrete contradiction, a far more real contradiction, a contradiction, therefore, that is much more difficult to deal with. If you receive that contradiction virtually, you have a much better chance of dealing with it. It's easier to simply turn the telephone off, or the feeling itself is a virtual feeling, not a concrete one. And virtual feelings have a much better chance of being worked with than concrete ones.
I wonder then if ghosting a romantic interest is the kinder thing to do than to break up with them to their face. What say you?
Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. Sitting down and telling a fiance or God knows who that you're in a relationship with that the relationship is over, that's hard. That's very hard. Why? Because the response that you get from that, the relational connection, the relational comeback that you'll get from that person will be a concrete response. It will be a concrete comeback, which is much more difficult to deal with relationally than that comeback that comes in a text message or some other kind of email or a call that they say they have to leave because they have somebody at the door. Anything that is more virtual is always something that is easier to deal with relationally. And again, that's who we are. We're relational beings. So that's an important thing for us, how we configure our relationships with our outside world.
I know with the way technology is moving, there's a lot more of us that are engaging in online virtual relationships than in concrete relationships. And it seems like there are some people that champion them over the concrete relationships, probably because they have had so many contradictions in concrete relationships that they believe that this is the best thing to do to protect themselves. Would you agree with that strategy?
Yes, of course I would. And it's one that is brand new to certain groups of people that have lived long enough to remember when there were no computers, much less telephones that you could put in your pocket. People that could reach you immediately. You scowled at that idea. And then you thought, well, maybe that isn't so bad after all. I could talk to them on the phone. I don't have to go to their house. They don't have to come to mine. I kind of like that. And I just found out that you could text them too. That's really a good idea. And now I found a way to relationally distance myself from them far better than I was when I just spoke to them on the phone. So relationships in general have changed dramatically since the computer and cell phone came out. Now there are all kinds of options for each one of us to remain in a kind of direct relationship, but one that is actually virtual, with far less of a threat that we have to deal with than if I were speaking with someone directly, sitting down in front of me. How do I say goodbye to that person? I can't throw them out of the house. That would be rude. And I'd be in for a lot of contradiction. But when I say, oh, there's someone at the door, I have to go to the door. I'm sorry I have to leave the conversation. That's fine. They'll understand that. I can hang up. I've had enough. And nobody's going to be hurt. There are no threats there. It's a much better deal for me relationally. And yet, at the same time, I don't get that positive, direct, concrete feedback from the person. The feedback that I get is only virtual. So I get less threat and I get less of a positive comeback if that positive comeback is possible. So it's a two-way street. If virtual is what you want, virtual is what you're going to get.
I have seen cases now where people are dating AI models. And I don't mean fashion models. I mean language models where they're having, it seems that some people are getting carried away with these kinds of relationships with AI. I haven't tried it, and I don't think I will. I'm afraid I might like it so much. So why do you think people are becoming so enamored with these relationships they're having, both romantic relationships I've heard of, the therapeutic relationships? They treat AI models as a therapist as opposed to going and sitting in a therapist's office. Can you help me understand the benefit, if any, to this type of relationship? Or is there something you might want to contend is problematic with this sort of relationship?
Well, I'd have to say yes to both those questions. That is to say, as we were talking about before, you get what you ask for. You can pretend, that's a virtual word, you can pretend to have a relationship with an AI model. And this has only begun, by the way. This in just another 10 years will be a whole different thing, where you'll find that people will tend to choose the virtual option than the concrete option, the virtual relationship instead of the concrete one. It's just a safer place to be. So the comeback that you have or that you're looking for is really a risk. But you know that if you're talking to an AI model, that risk is not real. It's virtual. And so the risk is greatly reduced. And any suggestions or guidelines that you're given by the AI model, you can take in a concrete way or a virtual one. You get to choose. You're in the driver's seat. You control the relationship. Whereas if it were a direct relationship with a real person, you're not in control. You're only partially in control. The other person is the other part of the control that you're trying to deal with. So it's a safer, much safer option to deal with AI than it is to deal with a real person.
So, in your professional opinion, as a clinical psychologist, should we all start engaging in AI relationships over human relationships?
You can if you want to, and you can if you're satisfied with the kind of relationship that is. You have to keep in mind that if you're using an AI model, you're getting AI responses, and you are imagining that AI as an AI person, not as a real person. So the feedback that you get is not concrete feedback. It's AI or virtual feedback. So any positive response that you may receive from the AI therapist is only virtual. It's not real. So you can't get away with having a virtual relationship and thinking that you're getting a concrete response. You're getting a virtual response. You get what you invest back. That you can't have it both ways. That's the problem with virtuality.
But wouldn't we prefer having an affirming virtual response to a contradicting concrete response? Wouldn't that be better for us psychologically?
Yes, it would, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get a positive response from the AI model either. You have to keep that in mind. That AI model will be trained to be a true psychologist or a psychiatrist. And in that sense, will respond to you according to what you tell them. So it's not, I've never tried it, so I'm speaking through my hat. I'm making this up, but I don't see how you could evade the virtual sense of that relationship when that relationship is a virtual one, no matter what.
Well, I think we're at the beginning stages of all of that, and I'm curious to see what direction it all goes in. The impression I have is that in many, many cases, the reason people are becoming so enamored with these AI models is because they are only affirming. They don't contradict.
That will change. When the AI model is programmed to be as human as possible, there will be very definite changes in the other direction. But you can always turn them off. And if you're a psychiatrist or a psychologist, will have a difficult time being turned off of you getting up and saying, I've had enough of this, thank you very much. You'll feel something. That's going to affect you far more than it will be affecting you when you take an AI model and turn them off. There's a big difference.
So our human relationships are always going to be more impactful than any virtual relationship will ever be, regardless of how close to human behavior the AI model will become.
Yes, and in some cases, that'll be just fine. That is to say, if you want a weather report, if you want a mathematical problem solved, if you want to present a quandary that you have about an equation that you're working on, or how to fix the furnace that isn't functioning at all during the wintertime, you'll be fine with dealing with AI. There'll be no problem. It's going to take a time for AI to get to that point, but it will, and that'll be fine. What won't be fine is when the human element is extracted from the relationship you're having. Then that's going to change dramatically. Your AI partner will not give you always positive answers. They will give you the answers that they've been trained to give you. And sometimes those answers can be negative. The advantage will be, as I said before, you can turn them off and no one will be hurt, not even the AI model.
Understand why we all think, feel, and do the things we do. Read It's Not Your Fault by Roger Stolensby. Link in the comments below.